I looked forward to Yaoyao for 18 months, but in the end, I almost never use her anymore. And it's not because she's bad, far from it. Healers often get overlooked, but Yaoyao is without doubt one of the strongest of all, despite being a mere 4-star character. And it's not because I don't love her. I'm always a sucker for the cute chibi characters, and Yaoyao is easily one of the most adorable in the game, both in terms of design and personality. She's absolutely become one of my favorites. Let's talk about why she's so great, what holds her back, and how a character who came out not much later ended up usurping her from every one of the teams I had built for her. I first heard of Yaoyao back in the very early days after I started playing at the start of version 2. People were discussing upcoming characters and someone shared this picture, which had been posted on Hoyo's blog in October 2020, before Genshin was even released. Yaoyao was just utterly adorable, so I could not wait for her to be added to the game. Every now and then, people would ask about upcoming characters I was excited about, and Yaoyao always came to mind. When she was not released in the beginning of Sumeru, it started to feel like she might have been abandoned by the devs, but eventually, in version 3.4, she was finally added to the game. She was even more adorable in person. She grew up in the tranquil mountains north of Qingche village and was taken in as a disciple by Streetwood Rambler. She's generous and sincere, and despite her young age, she's always taking care of everyone around her. Her friendship with Gigi is utterly adorable. Yaoyao considers Gigi her best friend, even though Gigi keeps forgetting her. Whenever that happens, she just reminds Gigi to read her notebook, which tells her they're best friends. Any scene with the two of them together is just precious. Also, her little rabbit companion called Yugui is so cute that I even got it as a plushie. I was a little apprehensive about her kit. I really wanted her to be good. The two 4-stars released just before her were both fantastic, so I would have been unsurprised if Hoyo had ended up making Yaoyao a little underwhelming in comparison. But even if she was, I was not going to let that deter me. Since she's from Liyue, she was available on the Lantern Ride 4-star selector, so at least I didn't have to worry about missing out on her completely. Even better, her first banner was Alhaitham's debut, and I absolutely loved him. Even though I ended up going for C1 Alhaitham, Hoyo just showered me with countless Xinyans and only deigned to give me 2 Yaoyaos. Fortunately, Yaoyao's kit was everything I had hoped for. Yaoyao is a Dendro Spear user with adorably clumsy normal attacks plus the typical charged and plunging attacks, all of which are irrelevant to her playstyle. Her skill is pretty useful. She throws out a Yugui, which then stays on field for 10 seconds, either via tap mode for a quick throw or hold mode which lets you aim. While Yugui is active, it throws radishes either at you or at the enemies, healing characters it hits and dealing dendro damage to enemies within its small AoE. Yugui will target on-field characters if they're below 70% HP and will randomly target enemies if all characters on field have above 70% HP. Thanks to the AoE, Yugui can actually provide both healing and damage and dendro application at the same time. Your character just needs to be close enough to the enemies. This means she tends to have better synergy with melee characters. Her burst is fantastic. It starts with a splash of dendro damage to nearby opponents, then for the next 5 seconds, Yaoyao is in her Adeptal Legacy state. During these 5 seconds, Yaoyao creates even more copies of Yugui, each of which throws radishes, and her healing now affects all characters in the party, rather than just the one on field. This healing is ridiculously strong, and can heal your entire team from near death to full health with ease. Her first Ascension passive further enhances her burst. If Yaoyao runs or jumps while in her burst state, she will throw extra radishes at nearby enemies once every 0.6 seconds. These radishes deal damage, apply even more dendro to enemies, and provide extra healing. Her second Ascension passive enhances both her burst and her skill. After the active character on field is healed by one of her radishes, they regain further HP every second for the following 5 seconds. At C0, Yaoyao is already one of the strongest healers in the game, and she does a great job of applying dendro, especially in mob scenarios. She does not need even a single constellation to be great. Her cons are still worth looking at, however, and in the time since her release, I ended up getting more copies of her, so my Yaoyao is now C6. Her C1 provides both dendro damage bonus and restores stamina to the active character up to once every 5 seconds. Her C2 adds another bonus to her burst. When it damages enemies, Yaoyao regains 3 energy points. This energy regeneration has a 0.8 second cooldown, so she'll usually regain 12 to 15 energy throughout the course of her burst, a huge improvement considering her original burst cost is 80 energy. Her C3 increases her skill's talent level, her C4 boosts her own EM after using her skill or her burst, not particularly useful in most situations, but decent boost to her personal damage. Her C5 increases her burst talent level, and finally her C6 enhances her skill. It adds extra mega radishes, which you Segway throws with every second normal radish. These mega radishes deal even more AoE dendro damage and much stronger healing for the active character. Overall, I feel like her early constellations are the most valuable, while the later ones are less relevant. This is the opposite of the usual pattern and is great to see for a 4-star. Her main role is, of course, to be a healer and dendro applier. While she does have her downsides, it's hard to overstate just how strong her healing is. Shortly after I first got her, I tested her at level 79 with about 33k HP with her skill and burst at level 8, and her burst healed 40k HP, an absolutely absurd amount of healing for a partially built 4-star. If you really optimize her for HP, when fully built she can end up with upwards of 50k HP herself, and her healing is just bonkers. She can also be a great battery, especially if you equip her with Favonius Lance and use her burst regularly, though even without it, her skill generates a decent number of particles over the course of its duration. There are some caveats to her playstyle, but before we get to those, let's take a look at her build and her teams. By a long distance, the stat Yaoyao wants the most is energy recharge. For her to be at her most comfortable, she needs upwards of 220 ER, though her requirements are usually lower depending on the situation. For example, saving her burst for every other rotation would halve her requirements. If she's equipped with Favonius Lance, her second priority would be some crit rate to ensure she can trigger its passive. With other weapons, this isn't necessary. Aside from that, for her healer role, all she needs is HP. And note that this means it's recommended to take her all the way to level 90. Her damage contributions scale with crit, EM and attack, but it's generally not worth putting much effort into trying to build her for damage. Yaoyao has several fantastic options for her weapon. The most valuable ones tend to focus on helping her with her energy needs. The strongest is likely the event weapon Dialogue of the Desert Sages. It has a strong HP stat and its passive is fantastic for her since it reliably refunds energy to her twice per rotation, reducing her ER requirements significantly. Her second best option is likely the Favonius Lance. While it doesn't help with the HP, it provides a decent amount of ER, and since her burst mode hits enemies so many times that she can reliably pocket passive even with a comparatively low crit rate stat, with this equipped she becomes a consistent battery for the team. If you don't have either of those available, the Fontaine craftable Rightful Reward is a solid option. Much like the Desert Sages, it has a HP stat and a energy regenerating passive. It's basically a less powerful version of the event weapon. Another interesting option is the Inazuma craftable Kitane Cross Spear. While its passive provides some energy regeneration, it's made less valuable due to its EM stat, though it can be a great pick when using her in Nilo teams. Alternatively, you could either use one of the many ER spears as a stat stick, or the 3-star Black Tassel, which boosts her healing via its fantastic HP stat, and just try to get enough ER from her artifacts instead. When it comes to artifact stats, she's usually best with an ER Sans, a HP Goblet, and a healing bonus Circlet, though a HP Sans and a HP Circlet are also viable options. In terms of artifact sets, she again has a couple of decent options, though which one to pick depends more on the team you're using her in than anything else. In teams focusing on Quicken or Bloom damage, including Hyperbloom and Burgeon, she's a great option for holding 4-piece Deepwood to shred Dendro resistance. However, outside of these teams, it's not really worthwhile since Yaoyao won't be providing much damage at all. For many non-Bloom teams, 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith is more worthwhile due to its team-wide attack buff, though this set has become less valuable over time as we get more variety of characters scaling stats, plus Yaoyao's burst interferes with its uptime by converting her radishes into burst damage. She could also use the 4-piece Instructor to provide an EM buff, which could actually be a great option for her in reaction-based teams. Alternatively, she could just use mixed HP and healing bonus sets. I personally built her with 4-piece Deepwood. It's marginally more useful to me, and until Hoyo add true artifact loadouts to the game, I refuse to bother swapping around to optimize each time. And as to her talent levels, her skill and burst are both worth leveling since they improve the strength of her healing, while her normal attacks are best ignored. Yaoyao is fantastic in Catalyse teams. The strength of her healing means that the rest of the team can be much more offensively focused. Since she can provide enough Dendro even as the solo Dendro character in the team, it becomes a lot easier to include a support like Kazuha, Sucrose or Zhongli to further boost the team's damage or provide some utility. However, with a second Dendro character, the Dendro overpowers the Electro, so animal characters no longer really work. Instead, the choice ends up being either double Dendro, double Electro, or someone like Zhongli to round out the team. One of my personal favorites is her with Alhaitham, Fischl, and Beidou. With both Beidou and Yaoyao, this team has fantastic defensive utility, while Alhaitham and Fischl provide a ton of damage, making it feel both comfortable and powerful. Yaoyao can also be fantastic in Hyperbloom teams. Again, her Dendro application is strong enough that she can be the sole Dendro character in the team, and her healing makes the rest of the team very flexible. With the second Dendro character added to the Hyperbloom team, it becomes a Quick Bloom team, since the extra Dendro application results in the Electro character being able to trigger both Hyperbloom and Aggravate at the same time. One use of this, which I find particularly fun, is Yaoyao with Furina, Nahida, and Raiden. Yaoyao's healing is more than enough to drive Furina's buff, Nahida provides ton of Dendro and extra EM, and Raiden provides fantastic damage. This team was vital for my ult account to 36-star Abyss several times recently. Yaoyao is actually pretty ideal in Burgeon teams. One of the most common problems in Burgeon is the Burgeon can only trigger 2 instances of damage at a time. Many of these teams end up creating Dendro cores in waves, which all get exploded at once, and as a result, much of the damage potential is wasted. Since Yugue targets enemies at random, Yaoyao tends to create Dendro cores at a steady pace rather than in chunks, so with the right pyro application, the team can maximize the Burgeon damage much more effectively. Her healing is also highly valuable here due to the constant self-damage caused by the explosions. For example, I really enjoyed Yaoyao with Dendro Traveler, Xingqiu, and Toma. This doubles up the Dendro and instead relies on Xingqiu's regular rhythm of Hydro application to ensure that the cores are created at a steady pace and the team works incredibly smoothly. And finally, Bloom. Yaoyao is amazing in these teams, which of course are at their best when built around Nilo. They make great use of her Dendro application, and her healing means that characters like Kokomi or Barbara can be built with more EM than usual, further enhancing the team's damage. Her burst also increases her personal Dendro resistance, so she can actually be a valuable driver in these teams, especially when off-field characters like Xingqiu or Yelan are included. And if Candace is brought along, then her adorable melee attacks can be infused with Hydro to make her even more useful here. This team with Yaoyao, Nilo, Candace, and Nahida is fantastic, for example. Nahida's EM buff is of course highly valuable here, and Yaoyao really shines. She's one of my favorite characters in terms of design and personality. She's a fantastic healer, she's easy to build, and she works in some fantastic teams. So what's holding her back? Her main flaw is that the vast majority of her strength is tied not just to her burst, but to running around with her on field for 5 seconds. It's incredible as a panic button, but this does mean that her utility outside of that feels weak in comparison. And to make it worse, its cost of 80 energy is very high. It also doesn't help that healers are devalued by people who aim for DPS above all else. There's some merit in this perspective. If the enemies die fast enough, they can't even hit you, then a healer is a wasted slot. However, the vast majority of players will be unlikely to experience that, and the comfort provided by defensive characters is underrated in my opinion. However, she is worthwhile even if you ignore her burst until it's desperately needed. She applies a surprisingly good amount of Dendro, especially against mobs of enemies, which is sought after by many fantastic teams, and her skills healing does make a difference. And in fact, most of the time, her sheer strength compensates for this issue. If she's built really well, it would be perfectly viable to only use her burst for a fraction of its full duration, since you'd fully heal most characters within just a second or two. This would make her much less problematic in many team rotations. With a full healer build, she can feel a little overpowered for her role, and some of her investment into HP can feel a little pointless. Some people decide to build her with a little higher EM to boost her damage, since even with less HP she's still more than good enough. However, even with that extra EM, she won't contribute much, and there's a subtle trade-off involved here too. When her heals aren't strong, Yugue is likely to spend more time targeting the on-field character for healing rather than targeting the enemies to provide damage. As such, it's important to find a good balance. But the real reason I almost never use her in difficult content is that Baizu exists. He came out just a couple of months after her, and I did not want him at all, as covered in my character review video of him. Long story short, I wished for a 4-star on his banner and was a little annoyed to get him too, but he completely won me over. In terms of gameplay, he brings just enough more to the team that Yaoyao remains limited to random fun in the overworld. Baizu's healing is similar strength to hers, but it's built into his skill instead, and since I have his C1, I can use it twice. More importantly, his burst also creates a unique shield, which is paper thin, but provides interruption resistance, which turns out to be extremely valuable in a lot of teams. And that's not all. His weapon type is also beneficial, since as a Catalyst user, he can be a brilliant driver who applies a ton of Dendro, and if needed, he can also equip some of the Catalyst weapons which provide great benefits to the team. As much as I love Yaoyao, Baizu tends to be the more comfortable option. Yaoyao is legitimately great character and is a formidable healer who can carry your entire team. Her only downside is her requirement for a little time on field, but with the right build, this is less of an issue. The only reason I don't use her constantly is that Baizu does the same job a little better and teams are marginally more comfortable with him in them. But if you don't have him, Yaoyao is more than good enough to make those teams shine. Until next time!